Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we will now commence the meeting. Apologies, we are still awaiting our guests. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we shall now commence our meeting. Let us welcome the Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, Ms. Maria Soledad Cisternas Reyes. Let us welcome the Deputy Executive Secretary of United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, Mr. Kaveh Zahidi. And let us also welcome Ms. Vijita Ratchathani-Tikul from the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, Ministry of Social Development and Human Security, Royal Thai Government. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Asia-Pacific launch of the Global Campaign for the Good Treatment of Girls, Boys, and Adolescents with Disabilities in the World. The Asia-Pacific launch of the campaign is co-organized by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific and the Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, with the support of the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities under the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security of the Royal Thai Government, the Embassy of the Republic of Chile to the Kingdom of Thailand, the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the UN Children's Fund, UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and UN Women. We are very honored to have with us ambassadors, government officials, representatives from human entities, civil society organizations, as well as students from 4 Bangkok-based schools. I would now like to invite Mr. Kaveh Zahidi, the Deputy Executive Secretary, the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, to deliver his opening remarks. Mr. Zahidi, please.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Excellencies, distinguished representatives, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It's so wonderful to see the room so full this morning. Thank you for coming. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the Asia-Pacific launch of the campaign for the good treatment of girls, boys, and adolescents with disabilities. I wish to first extend my deep appreciation to Ms. Maria Soledad Cisternas Reyes, the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary-General on Disability and Accessibility, for initiating the launch of the global campaign in the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you so much. You have really inspired us and brought us together this morning. I would also like to thank the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security of the Royal Thai Government, through you, Kun Vichita, and the Embassy of the Republic of Chile to the Kingdom of Thailand. Thank you, Ambassador. The Special Representative of the UN Secretary-General on Violence Against Children, and of course our sister UN agencies for supporting this wonderful event. For us at ESCAP, this campaign is really a critical part of our efforts to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and to do so in a way that is leaving no one behind. In Asia and the Pacific, an estimated 690 million persons live with one or more form of disability. Leaving no one behind means addressing this large and growing segment of our population and of our community. And there are really compelling reasons for us to act now. Children and adolescents with disabilities are more vulnerable to degrading treatment. They are 3 or 4 times more at risk of experiencing violence. Exclusion from educational and social opportunities are isolating many children and adolescents with disabilities, exacerbating the risk of exposure to violence. And the numbers speak for themselves. Across Asia and the Pacific, around 50% of children with disabilities do not transition from primary to secondary education. Consequently, persons with disabilities are 2 to 6 times less likely to be employed compared to their peers. Children and adolescents with disabilities are more frequently placed in institutional care, where they are particularly vulnerable to physical and sexual violence. And women and girls constitute more than half of the region's persons with disabilities, but by simple virtue of their gender, face additional exposure to violence. For instance, fertility regulation through sterilization, a form of institutionalized violence. In low and middle income countries, more than half of women with disabilities living in rural areas have insufficient access to police intervention, legal protection, and preventive care. And these are just some of the statistics that tell us how compelling it is for us to act. So the Asia-Pacific launch of the global campaign is really an opportunity for us to collectively reevaluate where we stand with the good treatment of girls, boys, and adolescents with disabilities in our region. But our work is not starting today. Governments across Asia and the Pacific have already adopted international and regional frameworks which can be instrumental in eliminating disability-based violence and discrimination. We are in the 3rd Asian and Pacific decade of persons with disabilities, guided by the Incheon strategy to make the right real for persons with disabilities. One of the key targets of the Incheon strategy is to increase the measures to protect girls and women with disabilities from all forms of violence and abuse, and to ensure that children and adolescents with disabilities can pursue their development without compromising their personal integrity. Just last year, our member states adopted the far-reaching Beijing Declaration and Action Plan that set the course for scaling up action and ambition for the implementation of the Incheon strategy. We have a clear, detailed, and ambitious 5-year plan to transform the lives of countless children and adolescents with disabilities. Of course, the ambitions, the commitments set out in these frameworks need to be translated into action. I would therefore like to leave you with 4 elements that we believe will be vital for taking our work forward. Firstly, to promote the good treatment of girls, boys, and adolescents with disabilities, they need to be counted. The lack of adequate sex and disability disaggregated data severely hampers our work. We lack the data regarding exposure to violence to make the targeted interventions needed. Indeed, due to insufficient data, really the full extent of violence against persons with disabilities remains largely unknown. ESCAP's publication last year, Building a Disability-Inclusive Societies in Asia and the Pacific, showed many more of the glaring deficiencies of data. For example, only 2 out of the 35 participating countries provided sex and disability disaggregated data on access to sexual and reproductive health services available to women and girls with disabilities. What is more, countries in the region use different definitions of disability, with the result being that potentially millions of persons with disabilities go uncounted, undermining the effective design, implementation, and evaluation of disability policies. Second, comprehensive legal measures are absolutely a vital element for guaranteeing the rights of children and adolescents with disabilities. Legal measures in harmony not just with the letter, but the spirit of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and indeed the Incheon Strategy and Beijing Declaration are the best ways to ensure early detection, intervention, and the good treatment of children and adolescents with disabilities. And these are entirely in the hands of our member states. Thirdly, we need to ensure the full and equal participation of persons with disabilities in decision-making processes. The disability rights movement, and many of you are familiar with this, has championed the message of nothing about us without us. Doing so results in more effective, more representative, and disability-inclusive policies. But across Asia-Pacific, persons with disabilities continue to be significantly underrepresented in decision-making positions. Within national parliaments, for example, the average representation of persons with disabilities is only 0.4%. And for women parliamentarians with disabilities, average representation amounts to only 0.1%. So we're a long way to achieving nothing about us without us. And fourth and last, outreach, communication, and demonstrating that disability-inclusive development is a powerful catalyst for achieving sustainable development will be critical for our work ahead. Research shows us that the increased participation of persons with disabilities in disability-inclusive employment on an equal basis to persons without disabilities actually increases GDP of countries in the region by 1 to 7%. In other words, disability-inclusive development benefits everyone. But the message and the principles for protection and well-being still need to move beyond our conference rooms into our communities. So to finish, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, we at ESCAP commit to use this very timely opportunity of the launch afforded to us today to accelerate our efforts to ensure that no girl, no boy, no adolescent with disabilities is left behind in our work to reach the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zahidi. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure of inviting Ms. Vijita Ratchatanantikul from the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, Royal Thai Government, to deliver opening remarks.
A very good morning, Mr. Kawet Sahidi, Department Executive Secretary ESCAP, Ms. Martha Santos Pais, Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, Ms. Maria Salodat, Special Envoy of the SGUN on Disability and Accessibility, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security, Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities, it is my great pleasure to have the honor of delivering the opening remark, launch of the campaign for the good treatment for girls, boys, and adolescents with disability in the world today. First of all, I would like to take this occasion to convey my sincere appreciation to the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility and the UN ESCAP with support of the Embassy of the Republic of Chile to the Kingdom of Thailand and all organizations to fully support of this campaign, which aims to raise awareness in eliminating degrading treatment or punishment, exploitation, violence, and abuse of all girls, boys, and adolescents with disabilities, and support the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability and the insurance strategy to make the right real for persons with disability in Asia and Pacific. The Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability under the Ministry of Social Development and Human Security is Thailand's focal point on disability issues with the main responsibilities to coordinate policies and plans on the empowerment of persons with disabilities at both domestic and international levels. Also, we have planned for empowerment of women with disability to ensure non-discrimination of women and girls with disabilities. We fully support UN ESCAP to promote and strengthen regional collaboration within the vast and dynamic regions. I would like to take these opportunities to congratulate UN ESCAP and our organization for this great success campaign. Finally, I wish all of you productive campaigns and successful collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Rachita Tanitkul. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. We will now watch a pre-recorded video message with opening remarks from Ms. Marta Santos PS, Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children.
Dear friends, it is a great pleasure for me to join you at the launch of the campaign 10 Steps for the Protection, Well-being and Development of Girls, Boys and Adolescents with Disabilities, which is promoted by my dear friend Maria Soledad Cisterna, the Special Envoy of the Secretary General of the United Nations on Disability and Accessibility. The campaign is promoted in collaboration with many partners within and outside the UN system. Warm congratulations for placing this topic at the heart of your efforts, guided by the voices and best interest of children. Children with disabilities are still too often largely invisible and neglected, and urgent response efforts are needed to safeguard their fundamental rights. Fortunately, there is reason for hope, with increasing attention placed on these concerns by the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development and through the wide ratification and growing implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and their additional protocols. Dear friends, children with disabilities are at heightened risk of violence. They endure stigma and marginalization, ill perceptions and discrimination in their lives. Sometimes they are perceived as a cause for shame to the family and a misfortune to the community. And in some societies still today, disability is believed to result from witchcraft, and in an attempt to liberate the child, harmful practices may be perpetrated, causing serious reach and psychological harm, and even the death of the child. For families with children with disabilities, child-rearing responsibilities are met with a deep sense of isolation and often of deprivation. Families may lack social and medical support and information on relevant services and entitlements. They face additional child-rearing expenses, and in many cases, they are forced to miss employment opportunities in order to take care of their children. These convergent factors aggravate stress in daily life, and they increase the risk of rejection, hostility, neglect, and violence against children with disabilities. Sadly, violence against children is pervasive, and it remains a silent emergency. But it's certainly not a fate. With the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, we have a golden opportunity to accelerate progress in our joint efforts to ensure that children are truly respected, empowered, and protected. The 2030 Agenda recognizes children as critical agents of change, and it seeks to transform the world, leaving no one behind. And of course, the best way to avoid leaving children behind is certainly by putting them first. Today's launch is therefore very timely, and it offers an excellent opportunity to multiply our efforts to empower and to protect all children at risk. The 10 steps for the protection, well-being and development of girls, boys and adolescents with disabilities call for concrete and steady action from all sectors and institutions of society. It is now upon us to transform this call into a reality for all children, a reality everywhere and at all times. Dear friends, the countdown to 2030 has long since started, and the clock is ticking. There is no time to lose. It is high time to close the gap between the commitments made to children and reality on the ground. As this important campaign reminds us, it is high time to promote a culture of respect for children's rights and of zero tolerance of all forms of violence against them. Together, we can make zero humankind's favorite number. I'm confident that you will all join us in this endeavor. Many thanks.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I now have the pleasure of inviting Ms. Maria Soledad Cisternas Reyes, Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, to launch the Asia-Pacific leg of the global campaign for the good treatment of girls, boys, and adolescents with disabilities in the world. Ms. Cisternas, please.
Y el público está ahí. Paula, público ahí. Sí, ahí está toda la... Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, authorities, friends. I am very happy to be here and to share with all of you the campaign for the good treatment for boys, girls, and adolescents with disabilities. I would like to tell you that the Secretary General last year appointed me as a special envoy on disability and accessibility with a special task to promote the human rights of persons with disabilities and the universal accessibility in connection with 2030 Agenda in Sustainable Development. Then we studied many topics about we need to create awareness raising in relation to persons with disabilities. But it's necessary to say that reading the report of UNICEF, when they tell us that children with disabilities suffer 3 and 4 times more prone to suffer violence and abuse, or taking account the situation of children with intellectual disabilities, they suffer 4.6 times more violence and sexual abuse in relation to other children without disabilities. In my opinion, it is not possible to be quiet with this information that we received through the other channels too. For this reason, with this information and other statistics, it was necessary to undertake the decision to create a campaign with the purpose to contribute with the awareness raising about the good treatment to girls, boys, and adolescents with disabilities, and finish with the invisibilization of this situation. I repeat, it's not possible to be quiet knowing this situation. And which are the fundamentals in human rights? You know that we have the first Treaty of Human Rights, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that prescribe to promote, protect, and ensure the full and effective enjoyment of the rights of persons with disabilities in equal condition among others, and to respect their inherent dignity. And briefly, I would like to mention some principles of the Convention. For example, the respect of the dignity of persons with disabilities, their autonomy, the freedom to undertake their own decisions, and the independence of the persons, equality of opportunities, no discrimination, and obviously the inclusion of disability as a part of the diversity of the human being. And finally, the Convention said the respect of the evolution of the faculty of children with disabilities, and to respect the preservation of their specific identity. And you can see that the Convention speaks about no discrimination of children with disabilities in Article 7. At the same time, the need that heard to children with disabilities and consider their opinion in equal condition among others, and the best interest of the child. It is easily to make a connection with the Convention of the Right of the Child. In both instruments, we can find the prohibition of violence, bad treatments, torture, degradement, and inhuman treatments, the prohibition of exploitation and abuse. For this reason, we need to connect these fundamentals, human rights, with the 2030 Agenda. There are 17 SDGs. But as example, I would like to mention SDG number 3, healthy life and the welfare for all persons in different ages, in different places. For this reason, we have arguments based in human rights and now in sustainable development agenda to think and to prepare this campaign. We have taken 1 year to prepare this campaign with the goal to contribute with the awareness raising in the prevention of bad treatment. And we like to mention in positive way good treatment to girls, boys, and adolescents with disabilities. And in this line, we prepare the campaign, not in an office with a computer writing about the principles, no. Nothing about us without us is a reality in all the activities in relation to persons with disabilities and different activities or fields. For this reason, our first step was to create a focus group to get the experience of persons with disabilities in relation to their childhood, and to have interview with children with disabilities and different kinds of disabilities, including intellectual disabilities. Based in this wonderful information, real information, we prepare the first draft. Second, we consult with the international organization of persons with disabilities around the world, a second version in this moment with the comments of them. And third, we present the material to the special representative about violence against children, Marta Santos, that you listened, and to UNICEF. And finally, we got the final version that you will know today, and with special products. The first is the Decalogue, with the 10 principles for the good treatment to boys, girls, and adolescents with disabilities, and with a special sentence, commit to me. Commit to me is the voice of the children with disabilities and adolescents in relation to the authorities, to you, to me, to the audience that are saying this ceremony through internet, and to everybody. And I would like to ask Paula present these 10 principles, the Decalogue. This is through little books. The presentation is through little books, through a video that you will see. But now, Paula, tell it one by one principles. Thank you. Okay. Tú te quedas así y yo me voy. Sí, te vas con ella. Baja una más. Esto y acá tú.
Thank you. Well, we'll start with the title, 10 Principles for My Protection, Well-Being and Development as a Girl, Boy, or Adolescent with Disabilities. Girls, boys, and adolescents with disabilities should always be well treated, like other children and adolescents, protecting them from all forms of violence and abuse. A good treatment will produce positive effects on their physical and mental development. Commit to me. Principle 1. I exist as I am, and I'm a person just like you. I deserve to be respected and have my diversity valued. I have the same dignity and human rights as you and everyone else. Principle 2. I like that you are kind. You love me and play with me. You would like to be loved and treated equally too. Have my best interests at heart and enjoy life with me. Principle number 3. I like that you take care of me, protect me, and teach me how to protect myself. I will also be there for you in my own way. Principle number 4. I want you to accept me as I am. Help me develop my abilities and talents, and give me a good quality education. I am happy when you see my strengths and help me to engage with others. Principle number 5. I like that you listen to me. Explain to me what is happening and consider my opinion. This makes me feel safe and helps me learn and develop. Principle number 6. I like that you believe in me and help me grow. This strengthens my self-esteem, my capacity, and my autonomy. Principle number 7. I like that you understand me, support me, and reassure me when I am upset, angry, or frustrated. Often, it is in these moments that I need you most. Principle number 8. I like it when you include me. I want to live in a friendly, peaceful, and inclusive environment, and for you to respect and support how I communicate best. Principle number 9. I want you to respect me and protect me from all forms of violence everywhere and under all circumstances. Just as anyone else, my body, my soul, and my mind deserve to be protected. Principle number 10. It matters to me that you believe me. I need to be trusted just like you. Thank you very much. I would like to say that as the Office of the Special Envoy, these 10 principles, as she said, is for everyone, not only for the person or the authorities that are here. In my case, as a mom of a wonderful girl with intellectual disabilities, I need these 10 principles with me by the daily experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paula. I would like to say to all of you that we feel a great emotion reading these principles. And now we are going to present the video that UNICEF prepared based in these 10 principles. Please, the video.
The UN Secretary-General's Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility and UNICEF present children and adolescents with disabilities from around the world reading 10 principles for their protection, well-being and development. Principle 1. I exist as I am. I'm a person just like you. I deserve to be respected and have my diversity valued. I have the same human rights as you and everyone else.
Outra pessoa.
Principle 2. I like that you are kind to me, love me, and play with me.
Вы хотели бы, чтобы вас любили.
You would like to be loved and treated equally too. Have my best interests at heart and enjoy life with me. Principle 3.
أتمنى إنك تخلي بالك.
I like that you take care of me, protect me, and teach me how to protect myself. I will also be there for you, in my own way.
In my own way.
Principle 4.
Quiero que me aceptes como soy.
I want you to accept me as I am, help me develop my abilities and talents, and give me a good quality education. I am happy when you see my strengths, and help me to engage with others. Principle 5. I like that you listen to me, explain things to me, and consider my opinion.
Так я чувствую себя безопасно.
This makes me feel safe and helps me learn and develop. Principle 6.
Name?
I like that you believe in me and you help me grow. This strengthens my self-esteem, my capacity, and my autonomy. Principle 7. I like that you understand me, support me, and reassure me when I'm upset, angry, or frustrated. Often it is in these moments that I need you most. Principle 8. I like that you include me. I want to live in a friendly, peaceful, and inclusive environment, and for you to respect and support how I communicate best. Principle 9. I want you to respect me and protect me from all forms of violence, everywhere and all the time.
Как и все остальные.
Just like anyone else, my body, my soul, and my mind deserve to be protected. Principle 10. It matters to me that you believe me. I need to be trusted, just like you. These 10 principles are part of a new campaign initiated by Maria Soledad Cisternas Reyes, the UN Secretary-General Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility, to promote good treatment of children and adolescents with disabilities. Outtakes of the children with disabilities. Special thanks to UNICEF country offices in Bhutan, Brazil, Croatia, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Oman, Paraguay, and South Africa.
Applaud, please. You realize that they are the protagonists of this campaign and our obligation and responsibility in relation to the good treatment. I would like to say thank you very much. First to ESCAP and to the Deputy Executive Secretary General here. Thank you very much. Thank you to ECLAD that support with the printed material. Also, I would like to say thank you to the special representative on the violence about children and in UNICEF, particularly to Rosangela Berman, because both support personally the importance of this campaign. Thank you to them, my friends. At the same time, my thankful to the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, to UN Women, and of course to the Republic of Chile, the Ambassador Christian Reren, I am Chilean, and the support that they gave me, respecting my independence, because I am independent expert, but he gave me the support respecting this independence. ¿Alguna otra que se me olvida?
Institution DEP from Thailand.
And a special recognition to DEP, Institution of Thailand, and to the Republic of Thailand to receive this campaign here, because I would like to tell you that this is the first launch in the world. This is a global campaign, but the first launch is here. And in my opinion, this is an historic moment. I will send the information to New York because I think that it has been very, very wonderful here. And you will have the material in little books, in poster, you can find here. And the idea is to express this challenge then about the possibility to deliver through different governments, schools, etc., to the society, this campaign. And now I would like to give the floor to Paula, because she is going to present other messages, video messages.
Okay, next. Okay, next we have two statements. The first one from the Executive Director of UNICEF, Henrietta H. Ford, and afterwards the statement of Mr. Howard Taylor, the Executive Director of the Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children.
Henrietta H. Ford, Executive Director, UNICEF.
Violence against any child is unacceptable, but children and adolescents with disabilities are especially vulnerable. They're 3 to 4 times more likely to experience physical violence, sexual violence, and neglect. And yet, they're often excluded from policies and programs that protect children. We cannot accept this. Their voices must be heard. In communities around the world, UNICEF is working with our partners to help children with disabilities enjoy the same rights that every child has. The right to health, the right to nutrition, the right to education, the right to play, the right to safety. And we're working with families and communities to fight the highest barrier of all, the barrier of stigma and discrimination. Today, we're standing with our partners and with children everywhere to call on the countries of the world to take action, to design laws and policies and programs that put children's safety first. All children, including those with disabilities, to invest in free, accessible systems in which they can report abuse and violence, to make diversity and equal opportunity the norm, not the exception. Every child deserves to be safe, to be protected, to be loved, to be included in a community. Let's work together to make this dream a reality. Let's end violence against children and adolescents with disabilities now.
Dr. Howard Taylor, Executive Director, Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children.
Every year, over 1 billion children experience violence, abuse, and neglect. Children with disabilities are particularly vulnerable and experience as much as 4 times the level of physical violence, sexual abuse, and neglect. That's unacceptable, but it's preventable. Ending violence against children isn't just the right thing to do, it's also a smart investment to make. And we know what works to make it happen. Right now, we have a historical moment to make progress and end violence against all children by 2030. We have the Sustainable Development Goals signed up to by all political leaders, which now need to translate into action at country level and local level. We have comprehensive solutions, such as the Inspire package of strategies, which need to be shared, adapted locally, and implemented. And we see a growing intolerance of unacceptable behaviours through movements such as Me Too, which need to be leveraged to raise awareness and growing tolerance of violence against children. Particular attention must be given to the needs of children with disabilities, who face appalling levels of discrimination, stigma, and abuse. Their voices must be heard in the planning and the decisions for activities which affect their lives. Let's work together to make a safe and secure childhood for every child in the world, wherever they may live.
Oh, thank you very much. And I would like to say that after this launching here, we will make other launchings in Dominican Republic, in Caribbean, in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Africa, in South America, Chile, and then other agenda for next year. But we never forget that the first launching was in Asia Pacific. And I would like to send our treasure in this, I give our treasure in this pen drive to the Deputy Executive Secretary General with the material to print. ¿Me paro? Sí. ¿Dónde?
Thank you, Ms. Cisternas, for launching the global campaign for the good treatment of girls, boys, and children with disabilities in the world. And thank you, Ms. Paula, for presenting the 10 principles for the protection, well-being, and development of children and adolescents with disabilities. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, at ESCAP, the notion of accessibility is key to our practice of disability inclusion. Bearing this in mind, it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Pecharet Barisut Buatip from CODA organization, Children of Deaf Adults organization, to be our international sign language teacher for the day, who will now teach us a basic lesson in international sign language. Over to you, Ms. Pecharet.
Hello, everyone. I'm here to teach you some signs in international sign. Are you all ready? Yeah. Let's start with hello. Can you copy me? Hello. How are you? Good? Thumbs up. Bad? Thumbs down. Can we do that? And this is our applause. Instead of clapping, we shake our hands in the air for applause. And that draws our IS tuition to an end. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Pecharit, for teaching us today. I would also like to thank our International Sign Language interpreters, Ms. Julie Judd and Ms. Cynthia Cave, for facilitating this class. Before we break for coffee for about 15 minutes, I would like to bring to your kind attention the following announcements. One, I would like to invite all ambassadors and panelists to join us outside of this conference room in front of the Document Center for a group photograph. Two, there is a chocolate making demonstration and tasting session organized by Asia Pacific Development Center on Disability. Be sure to try their artisanal chocolates, an initiative brought to us by enterprising persons with disabilities. 3, we also have an SDG photo booth outside the conference center. Be sure to get yourself clicked and upload the pictures on your social media platforms with the hashtags MakeTheRightReal, CRPD, and Leave No One Behind. Make sure to tag us, ESCAP, and please follow us too. 4, we will have a live e-quiz following item 4. As preparation, please make sure to read our knowledge products, particularly our fact sheets. We have a prize for the participant who receives the highest score. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, kindly note that coffee and snacks are served outside the conference room. We will see you all here back at 10:45 a.m. Have a good break and thank you all. Thank you, ma'am. I think I'm not sure if I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, that's good. Thank you very much. It's okay.
Rachata Tanantikul. I tried to practice this morning many times, but sometimes it's a bit...
It's so long name, long last name.
But it's important. It's your own.
Okay, thank you so much.
I think we have a
Take a photo.
group photo, yeah.
So Julie, the only thing for me is, because we're sitting in such a way
ไม่ใช่พวกนี้นี่เนี่ยรอบนี้4ไม่ใช่เหรอวงโมเดเลเตอร์
Okay. Let me check. As far as I know, the item 5 would be led by our chef, Chai Chai, and then I'm pretty sure there will be some open session for every government, but yes. I believe I believe there's pretty much chance for you to talk, and then I need to come. Okay. I just make sure we try everything on the list and then everything is followed by. But I'm pretty sure we'll get. Okay. I'll let you know. Otherwise, if there's no chance, and then if there's like the room for you to talk, I'll let you know. But otherwise, it'll be fine. No problem.
Can she connect already? Yeah. もうコネクトしても。それが15分ぐらいありまして、その後にもう。
4 อันนั่นแหละหรือมีก็วิ่งหน่อยนะบ้านเดิมทำไงซื้อไปก็ยังไม่ได้อยู่หรอกมีบางอย่างใกล้ๆกัน最初いいですかねごめんなさい最初皆さんこんにちはแต่ต้องออกถนนใหญ่ก่อนไม่ออกถนนล็อกเข้ามาこんにちは私はこうですけど英語ができないのでเว็บแคปทั้งนั้นはいすみませんちょっと時間があれなんでเนี่ยได้แล้วแต่ว่าเขาไม่จอยแข่งเข้ามาเลยเมื่อเช้าสอนแล้วไม่จำเขาไปคุยอยู่เมื่อเช้าเปิดหน้าประมาณครึ่งชั่วโมงแล้วนึกว่าเขาจำได้แล้วก็เขาพูด
ไม่ได้สั่งบอกเขาแล้ว
เอาที่ไหนตั้ง
ไปซื้อมาไม่มีแก้วไม่มีหลอดมันไปเอาแก้วกระดาษ
Frequently, no. Just today. Nice to meet you. Flying and flying. It was a 12.5-hour flight, not 13.5 hours. But from Sydney, so 9 hours. Yeah, so Brisbane, Sydney. No, not. There is, but it's cheaper. It's cheaper. How long?
あ、もしもし、聞こえますか？
もしもし、聞こえますか？
はい、もしもし、聞こえます。はい、どうもありがとうございます。
これで電話は切っていいんですね。はい、このまんま。はい。ただ横で通訳してもらうので、その声が入っちゃわないですか？大丈夫ですか？はい。
Either of us aren't ruffling through papers. Yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe we can just see. Love that.
逐次で全部原稿を読むっていうよりも内容を通訳さんが英語で聞くことができる。でまあいいですね。4分ぐらいだね。
อ๋อไอ้ซามี่นั่นแหละสายยาตอนไปนั่น
同じです。はい。同じように英語で。それも続けてじゃないです。はいはいはいそうです。呼び出しあります。で、はいwe can get to hear her, right? I can go to her, right? はい読みますので、それであと会場からもしその藤原さんに質問とかになった場合は、それは日本語で喋っていただいて、それを隣にいる通訳の人が通訳していただければいいかなと。ね、せっかくなんか参加していただけるのにちょっとしか喋れない。申し訳ないなと思ってるんですけど、はい。すいませんね。はい。どうもどうも。
私11時10分ぐらいにちょっと授乳しなきゃいけないんで、でもいた方がいい。
最初だけ確認してもらえればいい。っていうか人たちがそれを知ってるんだったら
いやずっといた方がいいです。
ずっといなくても最初もプロジェクトされてれば
大丈夫。
最初の
いいんですけど、ただ
No, I think you can leave at 11:10.
Yeah, I can stay until maybe the end of the
Okay, yeah.
30分ぐらいですよね。
Yeah,そう。
So it's okay with Fujiwara? Yes, she's gonna.
And the SDG since you're here, it's a big success.
Oh really? Oh great! I'm so happy. Oh really? I'm so happy to have.
So how much time will it be there after the training?
Half an hour maximum.
Early address.
Okay, so bring the book back in.
Should we start anyway?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and then I bring them in, and then the formalities will start.
She'll invite.
After she starts speaking.
Okay.
Maybe just you grab it. Okay, once she starts speaking, should I give it to you? Yeah.
This is Siri, known person, is present.
Yes, everybody is present. And then Kumiko Fujiwara is already there.
So,
but I will introduce them. So you
yeah,
want to
I will just say, may I invite all the panelists to the stage, and then.
So we just kind of go from the inner circle.
They
right?
come.
Yeah.
First you go, and then there will be some ushers who will usher the.
Okay. Okay.
And actually, first we have the video, and
Right.
then only.
Right. Yeah. Because I need to lead Montreal. Oh.
Strange, but yeah. But otherwise, people may get distracted. No, who will say? No, I don't think anybody. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So, is Kavi supposed to attend the session? No, I mean, well, he can if he wants. How many minutes we are behind? We're actually behind by 20 minutes. We should start soon.
So my panel discussion should end. Maybe you can give me some hints.
Yeah. So, it will start, I believe it should start on 11:10. If we start now, then it should 11:15. And this is how many minutes? 11:15.
I think originally we took 1 hour and 20 minutes.
1 hour and 20 minutes.
Yes, so take it down to an hour. Try. 1 hour and 10 minutes. Yeah. Try to start by 10. 1 hour. Yeah, take 1 hour because then we will run over.
Get to 12:15.
I need to finish.
Yeah.
Not stupid. It's okay.
Can I just start? Because
Yeah, I
just
think you should
playing
start.
videos. Yeah. And the videos are ready.
Should I ask Kate?
Here.
She was talking about.
Welcome back, everyone. The meeting will resume momentarily. I request all participants to take their seats. Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. To understand the UN system-wide commitment to the global campaign for the good treatment of girls, boys, and adolescents in the world, we now have 2 video statements. First, we will hear from Ms. Alicia Barcena, Executive Secretary of Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. This will be followed by another message from Ms. Renate Winter, Chairperson of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child.
Dear friends, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 proclaims that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. However, around the world, millions of children and adolescents with disabilities experience profound discrimination and severe violations of their rights. This prevents them from reaching their maximum potential and contributing fully to society. Achieving the inclusion of children and adolescents with disabilities in all spheres of society is still an unfulfilled commitment. One of the main challenges faced by the society today is ensuring that this population fully enjoys their rights. And this has to be to move beyond the outdated concepts of disability in which children with this condition are seen as objects of charity and not right holders. This shift in perspective requires a far-reaching cultural transformation founded on truly valuing human diversity. As a society, we have begun that process of transformation, as can be seen, for example, in the wide ratification of the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disability. But without information and action, there are no rights. Therefore, actions are urgently needed to combat discrimination against children with disabilities and to guarantee accessibility and inclusion in all spheres. It's also important to keep in mind that the population of children with disabilities is not homogeneous. It is critical then that these actions address the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and inclusion that may be experienced by this population due to their gender, ethnic or racial origin, place of residence, among others. The principles enshrined in the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the Convention on the Rights of the Children establish a clear framework for the rights of children and adolescents with disabilities. In turn, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development takes a significant step forward in promoting the inclusion of children and adolescents with disabilities and their rights by calling to leave no one behind. I applaud the Secretary General's Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility Initiative, Maria Soledad Cisternas, on her campaign for good treatment of boys, girls, and adolescents with disabilities. It shines a light on one of the most insidious and most invisibilized forms of rights violation against children, the right to live a life free of abuse and violence. Through the 10 principles of this campaign, we hear the often absent voice of children with disabilities demanding to be accepted in all of their diversity. These principles express their aspirations to be recognized, respected, and loved, basic and fundamental conditions that deeply affect their development process. I invite you to support this important campaign and to reflect on how you can approach disability in your own daily lives so that we may, together, build a more inclusive and fairer society.
Children with disabilities have a very hard life for several reasons. First of all, because they are children, and not all children worldwide have the right to express themselves or to be accepted as subjects of law. And second, because they are disabled. They have a disability, physical or mental, and therefore they are discriminated against in all parts of their life. If it is in the family, where they are seen as a burden most of the time, which could be overcome very easily when families are assisted, or even they are seen as a punishment of God in several countries worldwide, which also could be overcome with the assistance of religious leaders. And they have difficulties in school. They are most of the time for economic reasons, because schools says we do not have money for adaptation of buildings for children in wheelchairs, for instance, or special toilets or whatever is necessary, and we do not have money for extra teachers to assist those children. And on top of it, in many, many cases, the parents of other children do not want to have children with disabilities next to their own. And furthermore, these kind of children do not have a voice. We have in our convention, in the Convention of the Rights of the Child, Article 12, who gives the child the right to be heard. Children with disabilities are not heard. Those with physical disabilities are seen as somebody to feel pity with, maybe to do something on charity, but not to give them a real voice, despite the fact that they have a voice and they are not mentally challenged. But even those who are mentally challenged do not could have a voice, like children. Children who are not yet mature enough to make a decision still have a voice. Children with mental problems also can have a voice, at least partially, but nobody listens to them. The best they can have is to be sent into an institution, far away from the family, far away from society, because then we have not to deal with them at all. A situation that we do not like and we should not keep. Finally, I would say that the cyberspace and internet is not only an advantage also for children with disabilities, but also a threat, because it's very easy to bully a child with disabilities as a classmate, for instance, in the internet, and then the child doesn't have any chance anymore. And this is another issue that we have to overcome in the future, in the best interest of children with disabilities who are children.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Aiko Akiyama, Social Affairs Officer and Disability Focal Point of ESCAP, to moderate the panel discussion on Voices of Persons with Disabilities and Stakeholders Action. May I also kindly invite all our panelists to the stage.
皆様がこれから秋山愛子さん、社会専門ESCAP社会専門官をこれからモデレーターとして。
Over to you, Ms. Akiyama, to moderate the discussion.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen and friends, it is with immense pleasure that I now welcome you to this panel entitled Voices of Persons with Disabilities and Stakeholders Action. Our younger sisters and brothers, children and adolescents are our future, including those with disabilities. And many of them are here in this room. We learned, however, through this event that they face disproportionate risk of exposed to all kinds of violence, and they are left behind from development opportunities. But we can change the situation. Against this background, we now have this panel and with 5 distinguished experts with 2 guiding questions. Question number 1 is, what are the real stories of violence against children and adolescents with disabilities? Question number 2, how could we change the situation? How could we actually work either together or individually to eliminate the violence and to empower persons with disabilities? In a broader context, we are asking the question, how we can really implement no one left behind in this context. We now have a panel composed of 5 experts representing disability community, UN mechanism to monitor the implementation of our CRPD, and UN agency, and human rights institution community, and then sub-regional intergovernmental organization. Just for your information, this panel will have 2 major components. Number 1 will be responses from each panelist for the first question. The second panel will be the responses to the second question, followed by question and answer. So may I now introduce 5 panelists. On my back, on the big screen, Kumiko-san, welcome, is Ms. Kumiko Fujiwara, Executive Director of the Independent Living Center in Kobe, Hyogo Prefecture, Japan. She's a disability advocate, but I also understand that she was also recently selected as a member of a government committee to study domestic violence. Welcome, Kumiko-san. Can you hear us?
Hi.
Hi, she says, which means yes. Okay, on my direct left is Mr. Montian Bun Tan, good friend of ours. He is a member of National Legislative Assembly. Thanks for the applause. You can also do in sign, which you just have learned. Lawyer of Thai Parliament, Senator, we always call him, as well as the member of the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And as I said, he is a seasoned veteran activist on disability rights. On Montian's left is Ms. Lee. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. She's a UNICEF program specialist on children with disabilities in East Asia and Pacific region, who has 2.5 decades of expertise on disability. In particular, developing countries. Please welcome her. Next to her, in the middle, is Mr. Sampasit Kumprapat, advisory expert to the National Human Rights Commission of Thailand, who represents Human Rights Commission community in this region. But he just told me this morning he was a member of Committee on the Rights of Children. So he has that expertise as well. Last but not least, please welcome Dr. Sali Nontasud. He is the representative of Thailand to the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, abbreviation of which is AICHA, who actively promotes the integration of disability issues across all 3 pillars of ASEAN. Now, let's begin the first round. So, question is, what are the real stories of violence against children and adolescents with disabilities? So, Kumiko-san, may I kindly request that you respond to this question, and I know I'm being very brutal, but within 3 minutes. And in Kumiko-san's case, her primary language is Japanese, so she will say a few words saying just hello, but her interpreter would follow that and then makes intervention in English. Over to you, Kumiko-san.
Yes, so I will be speaking on behalf of Kumiko Fujiwara, who is affiliated with the DPI Women's Disabilities Network Japan. Today, I would like to talk about 3 points related to violence that young people in Japan with disabilities are faced with. The first point will focus on a case of sexual assault, violence, and abuse that was brought to my attention during my investigations in 2011 on a particular woman with a disability. The second point is the issue of forced sterilization procedures conducted under the auspices of the former eugenic protection law, which is an issue that is currently being widely covered by the media in Japan. The third point is the issue of particular incidents of domestic abuse that have recently received attention by the media and some background information on such incidents. First, I would like to talk about sexual assault, violence, and abuse. As shown in Section 3 of the leaflet that we have distributed today, there continues to be cases where individuals who are receiving care from care volunteers or family members are subjected to such sexual forms of violence. Additionally, there are also cases of sexual harassment and verbal abuse committed by workplace superiors. Why is it that such issues occur? Based on our investigatory research, we have discovered that such abuse occurs within environments from which these people with disabilities are not easily able to extract themselves from, such as their homes, institutions, and workplaces. Additionally, there is also the issue that the facts of such abuse are rarely allowed to come to the surface, not to mention cases where the individual is not in a condition where they are able to, on their own volition, to make such claims to consultation services and the people around them, as well as frequent situations where the consultation services and relief organizations are not accessible to the individuals with the disability themselves. Another factor is that such individuals may also lack the financial resources to escape from these situations. As such issues become compounded, it is often the case that such violence only gets discovered after the situation has already developed into the worst-case scenario. The fact that such individuals are living with disabilities, that they are women and girls, and that the fact that they are so young of age acts as an intersectional intersectional factors that combine to further expand the scope of such harm caused. Moving on, as shown in Section 5 of this leaflet, you can find a report on discrimination related to gender and reproductive rights. The forced sterilization procedures performed on people with disabilities that was conducted under the Eugenic Protection Act of Japan, which was still in force as late as 22 years ago, also amounts to an example of such violence. Based on statistics, it is known that roughly 25,000 people were subjected to such procedures, and a 9-year-old girl was also included in this figure. Starting from this year, several of the victims have finally raised their voices, and they have filed lawsuits related to these incidents. The reason that many of these victims had kept silent for so long was not due to any difficulty of making such claims stemming from their own disabilities, but rather it was due to the fact that such procedures were carried out by the public administration in accordance with legislation that was in place at the time, and that there were even cases where their family members themselves gave their consent for such procedures. In Japan, it is considered a matter of course that the family take responsibility and protect or shield such individuals with disabilities. And in the past, it was common to hide such individuals away from society. Such an understanding is firmly rooted in society, and even in cases where harm is inflicted, there is a societal tendency to protect the family of the offending party. Amidst this situation, there are also heartbreaking incidents that have occurred. This April, there was an incident where it was discovered that a man with an intellectual disability had been kept in a cage within his home for close to 30 years since he was the age of around 12 or 13 years old, and the father was subsequently arrested for this. It is also common to hear cases where family members take advantage of such individuals in order to appropriate their disability pension money for their own use, and such cases are not even considered to be seriously problematic. Based on statistics released last year by the Ministry of Health, Labor, and Welfare of Japan, of the 1,615 people with disabilities who were victims of abuse, it was reported that 40% were male and 60% were female. It was found that in roughly half of these cases, the offender or assailant was a family member or care volunteer. In conclusion, as a few common underlying factors of such incidents of violence and abuse, it is often the case that a number of composite factors prevent such incidents from gaining exposure, such as the fact that the victims are living with disabilities, that they are women, and that they are of a young age. Furthermore, such incidents often occur behind closed doors in spaces from which the victims are not easily able to escape from, which act as the environments in which the victims lead their daily lives. Without access to the means of receiving relief, such problems go unsolved, and we have observed a trend in which society at large has come to accept the occurrence of these cases of people with disabilities being subjected to violence and abuse as inevitable and something for which there is nothing that can be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kumiko-san. A round of applause for Kumiko-san and an interpreter. But thank you very much for pointing out different types of violence against children and adolescents with disabilities, including sexual violence and then forced sterilization and then confinement. And she really pointed out this phenomena of things are happening behind the closed doors, which could be the door of the what we call family or institutions. And one of the challenges is that children and adolescents, they don't have money. And then even though their rights are, they know that their rights are infringed and they are victims of violence, they cannot run away and they don't know how to claim it. So this seems to be a very serious issue. Thank you, Kumiko-san. May I now move on to Mr. Montian? So may we learn from you about the same questions, what are the real stories? But you being the member of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, you can also tell us what is the committee's maybe operational definition of violence against persons with disabilities, and you can also touch upon your personal stories if you wish, and then your understanding of real stories of violence against them. Over to you, Montian. You have 3 minutes, and I will be brutal when it comes to 30 seconds left within that time constraint.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I will start with the work of the committee. In our review of country reports, we often put a lot of highlights on girls and boys and adolescents with disabilities. We have the general comment number 3 on women with disabilities, which also cover the girls with disabilities. Often questions are asked to the state parties over the issue of violence and abuse, exploitation, what it could mean from different region to region. In developed countries, many of these people are living in institutions because they are deprived of their liberty and legal capacity, and so many times their parents, their family, put them in the institutions, and the living condition in the institutions, you probably know, that have been degenerated into unlivable conditions in many countries. In developing countries, such as this region, many children and adolescents with disabilities could be kept at home. The same story as Fujiwara-san just mentioned. Some of them were very much living in almost like a cage-like situation. I have a relative who was kept at home without going to school until he just passed away recently at the age of 50. And he is a person with intellectual disability. For those whose parents cannot take good care of them, many of them are institutionalized, and the living in condition in the institutions is no different from in developed countries, and in some cases there could be worse. They do not have any personal freedom. They could be taking shower like as if they are plants, and many of them, because of being stateless or being undocumented, they have no future of being deinstitutionalized, because if they get out of the institution, they cannot find a work, and they could be arrested for being illegal alien in the country. Many children with disabilities are also forced to become beggars on the street, and this is a phenomena in all developing countries, developing regions. In this country in particular, and many countries in this region also. So I think we are still far from having full respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms for children with disabilities, but we cannot simply give up. We have to work, and so that we can ensure the enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all, and leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Montian. Thank you. In addition to what Kumiko-san said, you pointed out the serious challenges faced by stateless and undocumented children and adolescents with disabilities, and what we might want to call forced begging that are done by them. Yes, so we need to work to improve the situation, which we'll talk about for the second round. So may I now go and ask Ms. Liebe for the same question, but from your personal, professional, and an organizational viewpoint, and do you also collect real stories about, violence against children with children and adolescents with disabilities? Over to you.
Thank you very much. So this morning we already heard from other speakers what is the framework to end violence, conventions that are ratified by many countries in this region, also the Incheon strategy. I will not elaborate on these strategies, these frameworks. I will tell a couple of stories, a couple of facts. We hear there's not so much data available. We cannot say in hundreds of thousands or millions, but sometimes we have research that gives us percentages of the vulnerability of children with disabilities. I know there's young people in the room here, and I want everybody who has not yet celebrated their 18th birthday to raise their hand. If you haven't celebrated your 18th birthday yet. So probably about 40 of you are here. Yeah? If you were a young person with an intellectual disability, your vulnerability to have sexual harassment is much higher amongst 40, let's say amongst 40 girls. About 30 of you would have experienced sexual harassment before the age of 18. If you were 40 boys, about 15 of you, if you were 40 boys, let me rephrase it, with intellectual disability, 15 of you would have experienced sexual harassment before the age of 18. This is a much higher vulnerability than for people without disabilities. What are these reasons why people with disabilities, children with disabilities or adolescents, they face much more violence? There is cultural reasons. There are social norms that we need to address. We heard earlier that children with disabilities are not seen as right holders. There is pity, there is discrimination in the community. Not only in the wider society, but sometimes also in the household. I was taking note from research that was done in a country in Asia, where actually a child that is visually impaired was told by his own parents that your brother is able to do work in the field and you cannot do anything. This is psychologically affecting the child, because the child is seen as a financial burden, especially in rural environments. The children are also not sent to school, or sometimes if they are sent to school and there's no quality education, the child is bullied, is also seen as not normal. I hate this word. We cannot say the normal children and the children with disabilities, but that is often seen in a context of school. And so for children with disabilities, they are very heavily affected by this. We have heard from the panelists in Japan about situations of sexual harassment, from Mr. Buntan about children who are locked up in their rooms or in cages, even worse. So I will not elaborate on that, but I hope that I can also, in the next step, present some of the work that we are doing to tackle this.
Thank you very much, Liebe. Yes. And ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about children and adolescents with disabilities, but we don't distinguish normal and special. All children and adolescents are the same. Do you agree? If you agree, can we do the applause that we learned? Yes, right. So thank you very much. And then I believe you also pointed out some startling statistics about the experiences of violence and also cultural norms, how they are actually very powerful hindering factors for the empowerment of children and adolescents with disabilities. So we need to think about how to change that in the second round. Next, may I ask now Mr. Sampathit Kumprapan on the same question on real stories of violence against children and adolescents with disabilities. What is your understanding? Over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I would like to begin with the preamble of the 2030. Yes, I would like to begin with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's on the people. All human beings can fulfill their potential in dignity and equality and in a healthy environment. I think that this is the goal that everyone have to reach. And when we look at CRC general comment on the rights of children with disability, paragraph 5, the barrier is not the disability itself, but it rather a combination of social, cultural, attitudinal, and physical obstacles which children with disability encounter in their daily life. It requires legal measures, administrative measures, social measures, and particularly education measures to remove this barrier. But I found that there is not much measures have been launched for this. And if you look at the paragraph 2 of the same general comment, it said that the effect of disability-based discrimination have been particularly severe in the field of education, employment, housing, transport, cultural life, and access to public place and services. So I would like to begin with the education problem. Even if Thailand has policy that everyone can enjoy inclusive education, but without universal design and facility for children with disability, they have to seek for exclusive education, which is very limited, and at the same time cannot fulfill the rights to education. For children who have brain problem, there is no specific trained teacher available in the formal education. Therefore, many of them have to drop out of school. And some cases of parents of other children put the pressure to remove the children with autism from the school. And the last part is child safeguarding. Because of non-effective child safeguarding measure, compulsory sterilization is commonly practiced. Instead of setting safety rules for children with disability, they sterilize them to prevent from pregnancy. And the last point is that the neglect, abuse and neglect usually occur because parents and caretakers have no skill and knowledge to handle this group of children. Many of them have been locked up at home while parents go out. Many teachers get angry with children with learning disability and corporal punish them. That is the situation that I observe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sampasit, and you really definitely pointing out the core importance of what disability actually means. The functional difficulties that the people have, cannot see, cannot understand, cannot hear, doesn't mean disability. The real barriers disability exist in the environment in terms of social, legal, attitudinal, and other hindrances. And you also pointed out the important areas of exclusion, namely employment, education, and then other community activities, and how people who are close to children with disabilities, such as teachers, can really give a hard time and be a perpetrator of violence. Thank you very much. Last but not least, may I now ask Dr. Slee from ICHA to share your views of understanding of violence against children and adolescents with disabilities.
Good morning. I think outside of this room, it's quite unfortunate that understanding, awareness, and empathy toward persons with disabilities are still relatively very low. And this stems from three main issues. Number one, people tend to treat persons with disabilities as a homogeneous group without realizing there is diversity in disabilities and abilities. In Thailand, for example, we recognize legally that there are at least 7 groups of persons with disabilities. And the concept of disabilities itself is evolving. Aging intersect with disabilities, so we need to recognize that. Number two, the intersectionality of disability with other issues. We have gender issue, we have persons with disabilities, younger persons in particular, who have other statuses, conditions. My colleague has pointed out already about stateless people. I like to highlight 2 additional groups, asylum seekers and refugees. In ASEAN, we are facing the exodus of people from Rakhine in our neighboring countries to Bangladesh. A large group of them are persons with disabilities, especially younger persons. And also the people in workplace with disabilities, they tend to be treated as tokens. Although they are employed, workplace is not equipped with accessible equipment. Universal design is not fully implemented. I think this is the second problem. The third, and I think this has come to my mind and to my experience negotiating on the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan that I will elaborate further, is about autonomy. People tend to think that disability is a curse, is a burden, and they don't believe that regardless, irrespective of the CRPD, which espouses the concept of independent living, independent decision-making, and autonomy, they still tend to think that persons with disabilities, especially those with mental disability, do not have, should not have independent decision-making and autonomy. That decision-making must be made by other people, and this leads to violence. We heard in this very room when I organized a regional dialogue on persons with disability to mainstream their rights across ASEAN region, that in many countries, younger persons with disabilities are treated like a curse, like stigma, like burden. And many of them are caged. Many of them are tied in the room. And we heard this story all the time. So this is I think the origin of the many types of violence that we hear today. And I'll come up with the second round of the way forward on many of these issues. Thank you very much, Aiko.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sari, being on time. Again, diversity within disability community. Yes, yes. We should not dump them up as a one single group. And then he mentioned the importance of other overlooked group of people, such as asylum seekers. And yes, we are really, really driven by our socialization process or misconception about capability and lack of capabilities. Capability could be myriad, it manifests in different ways. So just because persons with intellectual disabilities is intellectually disabled, that doesn't mean that they are not capable. So I think we need to embrace diversity of capabilities of people in general and children, adolescents. At this point, may I ask, how many of you are from international schools and schools in Bangkok? Raise your hand, welcome. I'd like to formally welcome you once again. After the second round, you get to have a chance to ask questions and make interventions because this is about you. How many of you are representing organizations of persons with disabilities? Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, yes, many. Again, after the second round, you please make interventions because, again, this is about you. This is about your campaign. Thank you very much. Now let's go to the second round. This is how we create our own future of inclusive, sustainable societies with this no one left behind truly implemented. So, Kumiko-san, can I talk to you, being in Kobe, in Hyogo, in Japan? What do you wish that will happen in terms of your wish to the governments in general, and perhaps UN agencies and other intergovernmental agencies, and about this campaign? Over to you.
Next, I will report on recent efforts that have been made within Japanese society, in addition to what we as people with disabilities hope to achieve. First, I will comment on the public committee that was formed to deal with issues related to violence against women, after which I will address the issue of providing the victims of the eugenic medical procedures with formal apologies and compensation. My first point will be on efforts being made domestically in Japan. This year, the Cabinet Office Gender Equality Bureau launched a series of investigatory meetings on a collection of case studies on efforts related to the domestic violence consultation centers. These meetings examined how assistance is being provided to victims with disabilities, and in order to gain an understanding of the situation, a survey of the domestic violence assistance centers, among other institutions, was first conducted, after which it is scheduled to engage in reviewing any issues that are identified. Up until now, as society at large had been largely unaware that victims of domestic violence also included individuals with disabilities, the fact that these review meetings were launched is a hopeful sign. I myself am participating in these meetings as a committee member. I believe that it is critical that we establish a system by which we are able to ensure the participation of women with disabilities as the party to which this is most relevant, not only for these current meetings, but for those in the future as well. I believe that it is necessary that we further investigate issues related to young people with disabilities that have fallen through the cracks between policy measures intended for people with disabilities and measures for children, in addition to issues related to women with disabilities who fall through the cracks between disability and gender-related policy measures as well. At the root of this issue, I believe that the principles behind CRPD are missing in the CEDAW and CRC. I feel that the international community needs to address this by bridging this gap in the future. As the second point, I would like to comment on the issue of the forced sterilization procedures conducted under the former Eugenic Protection Act. Receiving a recommendation from CEDAW, the Minister of Health, Labor and Welfare of Japan was made to take action, and as a result, interviews of the victims have been conducted by government staff workers. This January, a woman with an intellectual disability who was subjected to this procedure at the age of 15 filed a lawsuit against the national government, and the ensuing wide media coverage acted as a catalyst to encourage 7 other victims throughout the country to file lawsuits as well. And at long last, the situation has allowed some people to make their voices heard. Amidst such developments, national diet numbers are currently drafting legislation, and the issue of providing the victims with formal apologies and compensation is currently under review. It is our position that the national government must recognize its past failings in a genuine manner, and they must provide these victims whose rights have been violated due to the Eugenic Protection Act with formal apologies and compensation, as well as to further raise awareness on the issue among the general public. In summary, I believe that it is necessary to recognize that there are individuals with disabilities that fall through the cracks between different assistance programs due to the fact that they may be a child with a disability or a woman or a girl with a disability, and rather than just focusing on one or the other, it is absolutely imperative that we investigate this issue from a composite perspective in order to make such social issues more visible and to establish the appropriate public policy needed. Additionally, for cases involving public policy that has infringed on the rights of individuals in the past, I believe that it is imperative to recognize responsibility for such actions and to apologize. And by going further in eliminating ignorance and prejudice held towards people with disabilities, we can eventually realize a future where such abuse ceases to exist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kumiko-san, and interpreter. Yes, you had many good suggestions, like formal mechanism to investigate in issues and occurrences of incidents of violence, and then study, and then perhaps that could lead to legal measures that would clearly sanction any forms of violence. And then I think she was also referring to the collaboration of monitoring and implementation of a Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and Convention on the Rights of Children. Of course, changing the mindset of people is very, very important. Once again, this forced sterilization is a big issue, and which seems to, I seem to hear from many of the panelists here. And so one possible action is to really understand what happens throughout the history in different countries. It could be a class action or any types of legal action, but once again, it has to lead to some legal measures. Thank you very much. Montian-san, may I now ask for your intervention?
Thank you. Actually, the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disability just had a meeting, a joint session with the Committee on the Rights of the Child on this past Friday, 21st, before closing of the 20th session. And we agreed to form a working group together to come up with solutions that will benefit the work of two treaties, which focus on protecting the rights of children with disabilities. The Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities also just issued a joint statement with CEDAW, Committee for Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, with regard to respect for women's sexual and reproductive health and right, but with regard to the right of persons with disabilities to be protected. With regards to forced sterilization and forced abortion, the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities have been repeatedly issuing our recommendations to all state parties to ban all activities of forced sterilization, forced abortion, any kinds of involuntary treatment against children with disabilities or persons with disabilities in general. We need to strengthen, of course, as Fujiwara-san just mentioned, strengthen collaboration among committees, especially these three committees that are interrelated with regards to the rights of children with disabilities and adolescents with disabilities. We just recently adopted the General Comment number 7 on participation of organizations of persons with disabilities, which is, I believe, to be a very great tool. We need to encourage and support formation and strengthening of organizations of persons with disabilities, especially children and adolescents with disabilities, to speak and to protect, to have their voice, collective voice heard, and to monitor and to speak loudly to protect their rights, supported by their family, their parents, and the community. We need to encourage our state parties to take a look at that general comment. We also need to urge the government to mainstream the disability rights, especially the rights of children with disabilities, in their independent monitoring and also the protection mechanism against all forms of violence and abuse, especially the emergency call and the independent assessment and monitoring, and the way in which perpetrator must be brought to trial and redresses all measures to compensate and to see that all of these must not be just left without any action taken. And finally, I believe, again, persons with disabilities, especially children and adolescents, must be recognized as holders of human rights. Especially children must be recognized of their evolving capacity. They should not be kept as a child forever, because they are learning and they are being empowered among themselves, and they need to be part of the mainstream movement of children and youth, and so that they will not be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Montian. How many of you have been how many of you have either participated or observed the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in Geneva? Raise your hand. 1, 2. Okay. How many of you have either participated or observed the Committee on the Rights of Children in Geneva? 1, 2. Okay. How many of you would like to observe and participate in the Committee on the Rights of the Persons with Disabilities in Geneva? Yes, I want to. Anyone? Yes. How many of you also would like to go and then observe and then express your views at the Committee on the Rights of Children in Geneva? Okay, so we have a very committed individuals who would like to get involved. But thank you, Montian. I think you have updated us some of the collaboration taking place between CRC, Committee on the Rights of Children, and CRPD Committee, and then we CEDAW as well. So I hope that you continue to update us with that collaboration and involve these young people here. And then also, I think you mentioned the importance of mainstreaming disability perspective in all existing or emerging mechanisms to rescue or to respond to the emergencies of violence. So this really needs a collaboration from the local government level and then different administrative units. Now, may I ask Livet for your action points?
Good. I will actually elaborate on what is happening already, where UNICEF is working with local governments to advance the rights of children with disabilities, to end discrimination, or to use the positive language as the Special Envoy has launched, to advance the good treatment of children with disabilities. So we heard there's many causes and many reasons. So the way we will tackle our strategy, our action plan also has different aspects. So first is about awareness raising. And I really welcome this beautiful material that has been produced that we will use in different countries. So I like the positive colors and images, but also the messages and the words are very positive. So I think in general, when we speak about children with disabilities, when we work with the media, we need to send positive messages and use positive language. It's very important to raise awareness across many sectors and also in different levels of society, going from grassroots but also working with governments. If we want to work with governments, often we need numbers and data. So UNICEF has already worked on tools to better collect data on children with disabilities. So there is an important global group called the Washington Group on Disability Statistics. UNICEF is part of that and has really helped to advance the collection of data on children with disabilities. If there's household surveys done and there's questions on whether a child has any difficulties in functioning, that will help us also to see and to count and to measure inequity situations, increased vulnerability of children. So awareness raising, data collection, other work at systems level, such as, for example, in Vietnam, UNICEF has supported the government to develop a social work structure. Social workers was a profession that did not exist in Vietnam 10 years ago. And now there's a whole social work structure that is developed of different levels. Some is university degree, some is community workers, but with a social background, social work background, who will help identify children at risk, especially children with disabilities who are very vulnerable. We have also actions on deinstitutionalization, where we look at alternative care options. If children with disabilities are a burden for their families, well, daycare might be an option. The parents bring a child to a daycare center, the child gets stimulation, acquires new skills, eventually then is transferred into mainstream education, and in the meantime, the parents can raise their income, can have a break, because sometimes it's very hard to have a child that requires 24 hours on 24 support. So daycare centers is a type of alternative care. We also work in emergency contexts. So with the children who are refugees going to Bangladesh, UNICEF has created safe spaces, child-friendly spaces. And there is a box that we use for that. We call it a toolkit. We have school in a box. We have like a playing in a box. Well, what is in that box is inclusive. If we say, okay, we play with the children, we use a ball, well, it's a ball with a little bell inside. Yeah? And so that means if you throw this ball and you do activities in your child-friendly center, you can include children with disabilities. Yeah? Because children with a visual impairment can participate. They hear the bell that wrinkles, yeah, when you play your game. So there are many ways of including children with disabilities that we already are doing, but we definitely have to do more, because we will not reach the SDGs. At this moment, we say leaving no one behind. It's not about leaving almost no one behind. Yeah? And in the people that are left behind, it's very often people with disabilities that are not reached in order to meet the 100%. So, in order to end, because I know the time is running, we say about nothing about us without us, but for today I want to change that. I have a beautiful page open in front of me out of the publication, and it says, for young people, adolescents, boys and girls, and I would say with or without disabilities, I like that you listen to me, explain to me what is happening, and consider my opinion. And that should be our principle for our actions to address and, let's say, to advance good treatment for children with disabilities.
Thank you. Thank you, Vive. Yes. Very important to point out that to get counted, people need to get counted. And statistics, and then deinstitutionalization, and other measures that you are already doing through your country offices and others, and emergency situation. I think it's very, very encouraging to know. So may I now ask Sampasit what human rights institution, perhaps in Thailand, has been doing or planning on doing to tackle with this issue?
The National Human Rights Commission has mandate to submit the report on human rights violation and recommendation to the government, to the parliament, and to the Court of Justice. So I would like to request or recommend the government to take action at least this issue. Launch the universal design and providing facility for children with disability in one school of one province. And at the same time, at least providing specific trained teacher in one school of the one province. B, lunch education program for parents and caretaker on how to promote welfare and safeguarding of children with disability. C, organize community-based program to care and protect children with disability, especially when there is natural disaster. D, providing technical support to the family of children with disability. E, allocate budget to develop or provide apparatus for children with disability. F, to develop job training program for children with disability while promote self-determination of them. And the last point is providing of reproductive health care service to adolescents with disability, especially prohibit compulsory sterilization. That is the recommendation that I think our organization have to submit to our government.
Thank you very much, being sweet and short. Ladies and gentlemen, do you remember that we will have a quiz after this panel? So we will ask you what is the A, what is the B, and what is C, and what is E, that Takun Sampasit just has said. But it's very important to have all these recommendations that the organization like yours can actually submit to the government of Thailand, pointing out the importance of universal design of schools and teacher training, and then of course anything you do, budget is required. So it has to be based on sound budget and implementation. Yes. So last but not least, could I ask Dr. Sari to hear your views for the future?
Thank you. I have two main points. First, I've been representing Thailand in the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights for nearly 6 years. But I'm very pleased and honored to be working with and for persons with disabilities in the community comprising more than 650 million people of the 10 member states. I think we need to be aware that the CRPD is now one of the common treaties, human rights treaties in ASEAN, the other two being the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination on Women. So we need to seize the opportunity how we have been developing the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan with the hope of achieving two things. One, institutional mainstreaming. We hope that within the next 5 years, we'll eliminate the fundamental misunderstanding that persons with disabilities reside or are attached exclusively to the social pillar. They are political actors. They are economic agents. So the other two pillars of ASEAN, the political and security community, the economic community, must also be taking actions by, for, and with them. So this is the hope, this is the outcome that we would like to achieve. The second outcome is the relevance of instruments, the intersectionality. We have on the shelf a plethora of standards pertaining to persons in different situations. We have Declaration on the elimination of violence against women, Declaration on the elimination of violence against children. What about younger persons with disabilities? How can we use those standards for and with persons with disabilities? So this is the outcomes, the two outcomes that we like to achieve. The second main point is the holistic nature of the SDGs themselves. We often say in this room nothing about us without us, leaving no one behind. But I would encourage all of us, especially younger people, younger person with disabilities in particular, that you must be the agents of and for change yourself. You need to demand change. You need to demand action. On those 17 goals of the SDGs, they all relate to you. You know, there are 17 goals. You need to remember them as well. You know, not just nothing about us without us. Of course, it's fundamental, but you need to recall also key actions to be undertaken by government. Life on water, life on land, inclusive city, decent work. They all relate to us in one form or another, to persons with disabilities and persons without disabilities. You know, it's when I related to you about tokenism in workplace, I mean this. We say in Thailand and in many other member states of ASEAN that if you hire more than 100 people in your workplace, you need to hire one person with disabilities. It would be meaningless when you hire that particular person, but you don't provide ramps for them to access the workplace. It will be meaningless for them not to be able to take an inclusive and accessible bus to go to the workplace. We need to be holistic. We need to synergize our actions and our policies. SDGs will be a very good entry point. So we, with or without disabilities, must work together to achieve that holistic planning. You know, we cannot look at things in silo. This is the second point that I like to raise. Thank you very much. I'm within time.
Okay, thank you very much. Institutional mainstreaming. Yes, we should not get locked in. We should not get locked in our mindset to be only within a social development and social welfare, right? May I now ask, how many of you would like to be politicians? Well, are you already a politician? Oh, young students, clearly raise your hands to declare your dreams. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 from the floor. You want to be politicians. We have one politician here on the floor. How many of you would like to be businessmen and women? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, great. So we're just talking about mainstreaming in politics, for example, or economical field. So it's very important, and I think one of the very important things that Dr. Sari also mentioned about is do away with this tokenism. You really need a meaningful participation with substance. Thank you very much for all these suggestions. Now we have about 10 minutes to have your intervention. Thank you for waiting, young students and then representatives of organizations of persons with disabilities. Please raise your hand and make your questions. To whom you would like to address your questions, or you would like to address questions to all of the panelists, please clearly state. Of course, we welcome any questions from other representatives from governments, but under the next agenda item, we also get to hear good national experiences of different countries from distinguished ambassadors as well. So, floor is open. Please raise your hand, and then our assistant can assist you to set the microphone. Yes, I see one hand. You have a microphone there, right? You can say your name and where you're from, and then who you want to address your questions or make comments, please.
Hi, my name is Anit Kapoor. I'm from NIST International School. My question is to the panel itself, the entire panel. So I really want to know what sort of incentives or regulations can be imposed to ensure that people with disabilities are employed and are provided fair wages. And what sort of employment and what sort of jobs can they do? Anyone from the panel?
Okay, thank you. So the question regards to the employment, promotion of employment of persons with disabilities, some kind of initiatives or centers, or what is the thing? And then the diversity of job available, perhaps potentially what could be done. So who would like to start? Dr. Suri?
Well, I think that anything is possible. But in terms of incentives, I think two ways. One is quota, or we often call in the UN system now, temporarily special measure. But for persons with disabilities, I think that temporal nature will be quite a long time. To demand or require that employers employ persons with disabilities in workplace and make that employment meaningful, and provide a tax incentive for them to hire and deduct the wage. But the other thing, and we discussed that in the context of business and human rights, how can we use other leverages such as procurement regulation to help mainstream the rights of persons with disabilities? You don't have to be employed. You can be self-employed, producing goods and services, which then in turn can be supported through procurement regulation. For example, government can issue that agencies must give priority for products and services produced by groups of persons with disabilities. I think that is a good measure, and we discussed that in the context of business and human rights. Government needs to be innovative as well to do this.
Thank you. Any other? Montian, please.
Thank you. I think first we need to liberate ourselves from the old way of thinking that persons with disabilities can do and cannot do certain kind of work. We have to clear ourselves, our mind, from thinking in such a way that persons with disabilities are limited to only sheltered workshop. They are limited to only some very basic task, and they could never be promoted to executive or the administrative level. So by clearing our mind of that, certain measures could be enacted through legislation or policies. What I've seen in review of many state parties, many times the state parties are still practicing affirmative action and through a protected employment system. Maybe 50 years ago, it was the right thing to do. But now, we are in the situation, as Dr. Seri said, human rights and businesses are coming close to one another. So we should encourage inclusive, open employment. And a very good way of doing this is to create enabling environment and to promote the openness within the business community. And persons with disabilities could be great customers. They have buying power. They could also be employees and could be business owners themselves. And by promoting this thinking, children and adolescents with disabilities will have hope that someday, after going through lengthy period of education, they have hope for future decent employment rather than ending up in a sheltered workshop situation. I know that many government officials are very excited about a Western-style welfare-based sheltered workshop, 100 years old style, and they went to for a study tour, and they come back to the region and they think they could duplicate the same thing. Unfortunately, this is outdated, and they are at risk of having their human rights violated. Many people working in the sheltered workshop receive sub-minimum wage, and they have no choice of, they cannot form their own trade union, they have no future of career path, they could only produce substandard goods and products. So it's time to think differently, and I believe that many countries have done that already. As a member of the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, we will keep monitoring and we will keep recommending that the government shift its mindset and its practice from closed, protected, sheltered employment towards open employment with reasonable accommodation and accessibility provided? Thank you.
Thank you, Montian. So the young gentleman over there, is that clear? I think we are promoting going beyond the binary, thinking about they, persons with disabilities, they must be fitting into certain employment, and us, without disabilities, we can do whatever. It's not like we are talking about inclusive, sustainable development. We are making money, we are contributing to society, and then environmentally sound. I mean, to put it in a very simple term, we are aiming at creating that kind of society. Is that okay to go on to the next question, other panelists? Yes. Anybody from organization of persons with disabilities? Maria, would you like to make some intervention? Okay. Okay, so now I think I'd like to ask each panelist, maybe starting from backward, Dr. Sari, can I ask you to make a 1-minute concluding remark, and then we will finish this session.
Thank you. I think we are coming to a point where we need to recognize, the diversity of capacities, of abilities, of disabilities. We live in the world and we need to be tolerant toward one another. So whatever we can do, we need to be innovative, we need to be holistic. We often pigeonhole people into, disability, gender. That is a good way of doing it, perhaps, but we need to transcend beyond that and embrace diversity. Accessibility seems to be a bit of a problem right now, and in Thailand, we are going to organize this regional dialogue focusing on universal design later this year, where we want to bring to the awareness of the general public that accessibility permeates in every public life cycle, not just in the building, but also in information, in attitudes as well. I'm talking about accessibility in a very wide definition. So whatever we can, we need to do for one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sari. ESCAP has been also involved in creating this enabling master plan to mainstream disability perspective in all 3 pillars of ASEAN, and we've been working together, and I welcome all of you to join that launch later this year in December. So, Kun Sampasit.
Okay, thank you. I think that if we can remove all barriers by legal measure, administrative measure, social measure, and education measure, I think that there is no difference between person with disability or without disability, because all barriers will be get rid of, and everyone can do anything the same way, I think. Okay.
I appreciate the can-do spirit. There is no barrier. We think that people might have barriers, but people are people. It always all comes back to you as a person, regardless of some social norms and then labels. Lieve?
I would like to emphasize the need for partnership. If you look at who is in the panel, I think we are all working together. We all share our agendas. The human rights agenda, the ASEAN agenda for the region, disabled people's organizations, politicians, also business owners, private sector. And then I'm representing UNICEF and other UN sister agencies. Yeah? We need to work together. This is not something that one organization says, I can tackle this by myself. Yeah? I especially want to mention private sector. We speak about business owners. Think about their role in awareness raising. Think about their role in including, as we said earlier, people with disabilities in the workplace, but also giving young people with disabilities an opportunity to receive training and to become a contributing member in the society. And also, let's not forget innovation, yeah? Especially for employment, I mean, the world like it is now is different from what it was 10 years ago. If we see Mr. Buntan here with a keyboard on the lap, yeah, it's no more with Braille books, right? Yeah, so there is so much technology in place. It's digital Braille now. So much technology in place that opens, yeah, path for children with disabilities to be included in education and later on in the workplace. But we need to have partnerships for this.
Thank you. Montian?
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to leave with these three very minimalistic points that I'd like to encourage us, invite us to think about. First, participation. I think nothing can be done without full and effective participation of those who are affected. We're talking about children and adolescents with disabilities. They must be able to participate meaningfully or fully and effectively in all processes, in all aspects of life that affect them. And the second one is accessibility. I don't need to mention in detail. We need to encourage and we need to strengthen the policies and legislation to enforce accessibility, because accessibility is good for all. It will help us achieve inclusive education, inclusive healthcare, inclusive employment. And it would help us get persons with disabilities, children with disabilities, access to protection and safeguard. And the third one is empowerment or capacity building. We need to encourage, support, and promote formation of organizations of persons with disabilities. In this case, organizations of boys and girls and adolescents with disabilities, so that they can take initiative to protect their rights, to claim their ownership of human rights and fundamental freedoms, and work in concert with other people, with all the stakeholders in the society. And with these three fundamentals, these three minimum requirements, I think we can have a future and we can walk out of this room with the head high, and we can simply say, we have given up on giving up. Thank you.
Thank you for not giving up. And then we would remember, test you with all these points after this. Kumiko-san, thank you for waiting. Last but not least, perhaps you can make your concluding remarks in Japanese for 1 minute, because you haven't spoken, because we cannot speak and understand Japanese. I can, I'm sorry, but not too many people can speak in Japanese, understand Japanese. So please speak in Japanese first 1 minute, and then your interpreter can translate that into English. Over to you.
はい。今年最近日本で各省庁、政府機関が障害者の雇用水増し問題っていうのが出てきました。
So recently in Japan, there was this issue that a large majority of the ministries in Japan were claiming that they were hiring a larger number of individuals, people with disabilities, than they actually had on their payroll. They were actually doing this to get more funding while using the fake numbers.
どうしてそんなことが起こるのかというと、あまりにも障害者のことを知らないからです。
And the reason why such a situation was allowed to occur is because the people in charge just are utterly unaware of the situation of people with disabilities.
障害者はずっと分離、そして排除されてきました。
People with disabilities continue to be separated and marginalized in society.
ですので、まず教育に問題があると思います。
First, one of the immediate points that come to my mind is education is a main problem.
子どもの時から共に学んで、合理的配慮を受けていれば、障害者自身も自分は合理的配慮を受けていいんだということを分かるし、周りの人たちもどうすればいい合理的配慮ができるのかが分かるようになります。
So if such children with disabilities starting from a young age in educational settings, are given the consideration necessary from those around them, those children can grow in a way that is positive to them and those around them.
Thank you, Kumiko-san. Yes, I think that there is, oh, sorry. Yes, it's very important to just, again, it's like going beyond the differences between those without disabilities, those with disabilities, but it really, all the stories is telling us early investment in potential of persons, regardless of having disability or not disability, is very, very important for our own understanding of capabilities of all people in society. So with that, I think we'd like to conclude this session. Thank you very much for all. And then please applaud all the panelists, virtual panelists from Japan, and then the one on the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Akiyama, for moderating the panel discussion. And thank you to our esteemed panelists for voicing the experiences of persons with disabilities. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Kate Jarma, a colleague from Social Development Division at ESCAP, to conduct an interactive e-quiz. Over to you, Ms. Jarma.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can see we've got a screen in the middle, and we want to play a quick quiz called Kahoot. So if everyone can get their phones out or share with their friend or make a friend, please go to www.kahoot.it. Okay, and then when you get to that screen, please enter the code 667-2502. I see people are signing up. So Kahoot, KAHOOT.it. I see Ms. Aiko Akiyama and Senator Montian Buntan will be a team. So we've got some tough competition. And the PIN number is 667-2502. We have 19 groups. We'll give you a little bit more time. Okay. I'm just going to give another 10 seconds, and then we're going to start. Okay, I think we're ready to start, please, Youngju. Thank you. Are you ready? I hope you've been listening and paying attention. How many persons with disabilities are estimated to live in Asia and the Pacific? 2,690,280,000, or one person with disabilities? So please press the corresponding button. 5 seconds. Quick. Wow. 690 million, 28 winners. So this is the team, the leaderboard. Well, for that one, not yet. In the region, the representation of persons with disabilities in national parliaments is 0.4%, 10%, 50%, or 90%. We've had this data that was in actually the first speech. 3 seconds. Yes, 0.4%. Congratulations. Kun Anit. Okay. The next question, please. How many countries globally conducted studies on violence against children with disabilities? 1 country, 7 countries, 50 countries, or 150 countries? And this is time sensitive, so the quicker that you go, the better. 3 seconds? Okay, 7 countries it was. So the winner is PCG. Please raise your hand. Planke and Riz team. There will be some prizes that will be distributed. So please look out for Yongju. Thank you all. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ms. Jama. Thank you, Ms. Jama. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Chai Chai, Chief of Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Section at ESCAP, to moderate the next session titled Government Action to Move Forward. May I also invite our esteemed panelists onto the stage. It is my pleasure to invite Her Excellency, Ms. Saida Muna Tasneem, Ambassador of Bangladesh, to the stage. I am pleased to invite Her Excellency, Ms. Raushan Yesbulatova, Ambassador of Kazakhstan, onto the stage. Next, I invite His Excellency, Mr. Joachim Amaral, Ambassador of Timor-Leste, to the stage. And finally, I invite His Excellency, Mr. Christian Rehran Bargato, Ambassador of Chile, to join the esteemed panel. Over to you, Ms. Chai Chai.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and dear young friends, we have heard the concerns and voices of persons with disabilities, including children and adolescents with disabilities. Now we are very honored to have a panel of ambassadors who are going to share their national experiences and good practices in addressing such concerns and challenges facing persons with disabilities in their daily lives. First, let's start with Her Excellency Ms. Saida Muna Tasneem, Ambassador of Bangladesh. Your Excellency, the government of Bangladesh has been very active in promoting the rights of persons with disabilities, having a lot of initiatives, including addressing children, the needs of children with disabilities. So we would like to invite you to share some of these successful programs and experiences in your country. Your Excellency, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to, congratulate the ESCAP and also the special representative who's flown in from Geneva or New York. I'm not sure. She's... Hello, Madam, Miss Maria. And also would like to, congratulate all the organizations, including the Royal Thai government, the Chilean government, the UN Women, UNICEF, even ECLAC, another regional organization from Europe, and UN Office for the Human Rights, for organizing this program and also building this partnership and collaboration. This is exactly what we need. And really we're impressed by ESCAP's commitment to the question of people with disability, the rights of people with disability, the ancient strategy. And I know that ESCAP is probably one of the leading regional commissions, perhaps the first one, who've been dealing with the decade for persons with disabilities. And we just celebrated the midterm review of the decade. So congratulations to particularly our regional commission, ESCAP, for that. What's important, for Bangladesh government, the way we look at the rights of persons with disabilities and to ensure that we don't leave them behind is first, I think political commitment is most important. So we have a very strong political commitment, which is led by our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. And we also have a WHO CRO Goodwill Ambassador. While it's we know that there are 690 million people in Asian Pacific with persons with disabilities. With disabilities, there are 1 billion people globally. But what's important, it's also important to know that there are more marginalized people within that community with neurodevelopment disorders or intellectual disability. And trust me, they're the most neglected, the most stereotyped, people that don't want to be heard, they're unheard, unseen, and really at a corner. My question is, how many of us have families and friends who don't have children with autism, who don't have children who are intellectually challenged? And normally there's this huge social stigma within Asia Pacific not to come out in the open with such children. And Bangladesh, first of all, we've got laws. We were the first countries, among the first few countries who had signed the CRPD, and we have been members of the Committee on the Rights with Persons with Disability. Somebody asked me the question, was I there? I was there for many years. I used to go attend the meeting, but most importantly, one of the members, the members of the Committee on Rights with Persons with Disabilities have to be a disabled person. We represented a blind person and with other physical handicap were representing Bangladesh in that committee and speaking the voice of the people who are disabled. That's very important to engage them and have their voice, so we ensure that. We have got the 23rd, after ratification of the CRPD, we have enacted our laws on rights and protection of persons. It has to be rights-based, it has to be protection-based. So state has a responsibility to protect and provide rights, and we have done that through these laws. But there's also a special act for people with intellectual disability and autism and neurodevelopment disorders. We do have two innovative projects I'd like to mention. One is we have this mobile disability training center and a mobile service provider. So there are about 24 such mobile services where it goes from village to village with children, particularly for children with disability, to provide them training, vocational support, and mental support and counseling for their parents. There are employment, there is a huge grant. We have a disability we have a disability sensitive budgetary provision. Just like we have a gender sensitive budget, we have a disability sensitive budget integrated into our SDG national actions and also our seventh five-year review plan, where there's specific budget to provide self-employment to disabled people. It's very important to give them a vocation and they have the self-confidence to move on in life. In order to include them, the state has to impose certain laws for institutions, including private sector, not only state sector, to recruit the disabled people and also create provisions. Like somebody mentioned that it's not enough to recruit them. They have to have a ramp to get on but not everyone needs a ramp. There are other kinds of disabilities. So we also have a huge social protection system where we provide equipment, free equipment. It's important for the state to provide free equipment, free health and training services to disabled people. And in that case, you need financial resources. So political commitment, legislation to protection and rights, and then financial resources, creating infrastructure. Disabled people enjoy sports. We have created a sports complex for disabled children. So, it's very important for the state to provide them with the sports facility and allow them to participate in Disability World Olympics, and we are regularly doing that. So with these few words, I would just like to emphasize that, for Bangladesh, while the global disability picture, we have done our survey. We're one of those 50 countries that, we're proud to be one of those 50 countries that have done our national survey on disability, disabled people and also children, and 1.4% of the population is disabled. But what's important is in the Beijing, midterm review, we have tried to coin and, bring this issue to the ESCAP's agenda is the question of including people with autism disorder and neurodevelopment disorder into the 2030 agenda. It's about mental health and intellectual disability. It must be addressed, and all this, we must break all the social and mental barriers and taboos and stereotyping of these people and include them in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's wonderful to hear there are so many initiatives, especially the highest level political commitment is accompanied with budget. That's truly important. Now let me turn to Your Excellency, Ms. Roshan Blutova, Ambassador of Kazakhstan. Madam Ambassador, Kazakhstan has developed a national strategy on social inclusion of persons with disabilities and action plan. Could you share your country's experience in implementing this strategy and related policies?
Excellencies, representative of the United Nations and ESCAP and Thai government, ladies and gentlemen, student from NIST, and I would like to thank you for coming today. And first of all, I would like to express my congratulations on today's Asia-Pacific launch of the global campaign for the good treatment of girls, boys, and adolescents for disabilities in the world. And I consider it is as a significant event which emphasizes the region's commitment to leave no one behind in implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Kazakhstan ratified the United Nations Convention on the Right of the Child as well as the right of persons with disabilities, thereby assuming the obligation to implement international standards for the full realization of the economic, civil, social, and cultural right of the person with disabilities, including children, without discrimination and on an equal basis with others. In order to implement the norms of the convention, more than 30 legislative acts, including 3 courts, was amended. Work on the social protection and creation of equal opportunities for participation in the life of society for disabled people is conducted in accordance with the plan of measurement to ensure the right and improve the quality of life of persons with disabilities in the Republic of Kazakhstan for 2012-2018. Since 2016, the third stage, 2016-2018, of the plan is being implemented. At present, Kazakhstan has 670,000 people with disabilities, 12.7% of which are children under 80 years old. In Kazakhstan, inclusive education is proclaimed, which means equal access to education for all students, taking into account special educational needs and individual opportunities. This implementation of the right of children with disabilities to educate in the country is carried out by 100 special schools, where 19,102 children with various health disorders are studying. In accordance with the plan for the implementation of the state program for the development of education and science of the Republic of Kazakhstan for 2016-2019, and it is designed to provide special conditions for the development of inclusive education for 70 of schools. In order to improve the condition for organizing the education of children with disabilities, government provides the distance education. In this regard, children with disabilities are provided with the computer and special software. But it doesn't mean they have to choose only to study in, just in distance. They can go together with other children to school. Also, with the beginning of the school year, 1,159 students received access to the broadband and internet. One of the most important measures aimed at ensuring the right of people with disabilities is to involve them in active employment measures. In this framework of the Program for the Development of Productive Employment and Mass Entrepreneurship for 2017-2021, persons with disabilities, along with the other wellness segment, of the population have the right, as a matter of priority, to participate in active measures to promote employment, public, social, vacant jobs. In order to encourage employment to employ disabled people from 2018, governments subsidize the cost of employees associated with equipping a social workplace for the employment of disabled. The complexity of the problems that we are discussing today is obvious. It includes the need of act of the legislation level, at the level of the local authorities in education, health, social policy, and infrastructure. We must make every effort to create a society without barriers, so that people with disabilities become natural without barriers. And progress made in the last years in the sphere of technologies give us big opportunities in that sense. Drawing public attention to the problem of the right of the children and adults with disabilities is also one of the tools to achieve these goals. I just want to share with you my story. My mother, she's blind. And I know what is it to take care about a disabled, person who cannot see. How they feel, to be sitting at home. And that's why in my country I can see, just like she goes to the, special group who doesn't see. They talk with each other. They create for them games. This is government program. And I understand of the people, who cannot see what is it to be sitting at home. That's why I encourage our government to do a lot for them. It's not necessarily only for blind people. I have so many friends, like you said, Muna, with autism. It's also very important. In our country, as I know, it's just recently when I was in Kazakhstan, I went to one exhibition. Children with autism, they create such a wonderful painting, it's just like so beautiful. And they did some figure, just like it was, they involved in their inside. They were so proud about themselves, A lot of journalists, they were taking interview from them. They were so happy about that. And I think all the children, they have to go out from where they are. And parents, they have to understand, they have to help their children to be involved in outside of life, And taking this opportunity, I would like to express once again my appreciation to the organizer, especially to ESCAP and to Thai government. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. I would now like to invite His Excellency Mr. Joachim Amaro, Ambassador for Timor-Leste. Mr. Ambassador, Timor-Leste has developed a number of policies on disability, and your national youth policy specifically identifies young people with disabilities as a priority target group for support. So in this regard, could you share your country's experience and plans in addressing their concerns? Thank you.
Thank you. His Excellency Deputy Executive UNSCAP, Dr. Jahidi, Excellency Ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Timor-Leste has taken progressive steps to fulfill the rights of persons with disability and continue to invest in resources to provide equal opportunity and protect groups at the high risk from serious human rights violations, especially persons with mental disability, women and children. Through the adoption of the Sustainability Development Goals 2015 and the approval of the first National Youth Policy 2016, as a national policy and inclusion promotion of the right of persons with disability was adopted in 2012, a National Action Plan on the rights of persons with disability exists to implement the aforementioned policy and inclusive education policy. And since 2016, the National Youth Policy especially identifies young people with disability as a priority target group for support. Despite commitment mentioned, the gap remains wide. As of March 2018, Timor-Leste had not yet ratified UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. Government continued to make efforts by adopting the inclusive education policy by 2017. It's around 44% of youth aged 15 until 24 years with disability have ever attended school, which is half the rate of 87% of the peers without disability. However, gaps still exist and many youth with disability continue to be out of school. The recent education monograph showed that the percentage of disabled youth aged 5 to 24 years who have never attended school. It's more or less the same between boys and girls, 54% and 55% respectively. To facilitate and increase opportunity of youth with disability to participate in the benefit from the new development agenda to exercise the right equality to the peer without disability, the government will continue to its effort to ratify and adopt the resolution of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability as soon as possible. The government, through the Ministry of Public Works, continue to ensure accessibility of any new public facility for all persons with disability. For education, to improve access to and quality of education for youth with disability in line with the 2017 inclusive education policy, the government will continue to conduct an evaluation of the level of integration of disability in education and recommit to ensure schools are increasingly accessible for youth with different types of disability. On the health sector, to improve the accessibility and quality of the health service for people with disability, the government has strong commitment to ensure the training of all healthcare workers, including nurse, doctor, and midwife, on the right of persons with disability, including adequate and respectful ways of communication with persons with disability. To reduce the violence and discrimination and improve access to the justice system to the people with disability, the government, in particular the Minister of Social Solidarity and the Minister of Justice and the Secretary of State of the Gender Equality and Social Inclusion, as well as social communication, continue to ensure adequate support and resource as a provision of interpretation service, assistive device, and accessible transport to people with disability to access victim disaster, to access victim assistance support and support from police and justice system. To improve the public participation, the people with disability, the government, through the Ministry of State Administration, continue to train local community leaders on disability awareness and the role they can play in support people with disability to participate in public life and decision-making process. Continue to create peer support network for youth with disability to strengthen social network and engagement with broader youth programming and receive necessary funding to do so from the government and all donors. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for sharing Timor-Leste's effort in a wide range of sectors, including education, health, participation of persons with disabilities, and in particular supporting young people. Now, last but not the least, I'd like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Christian Reverend Bagato, Ambassador for Chile. Your Excellency, Chile has a progressive law on equal opportunities and social inclusion of persons with disabilities, which emphasizes the principles of independent living, universal accessibility, participation, and social dialogue. Your Excellency, could you share Chile's experiences, lessons learned in implementing such a progressive law, and maybe any recommendations you have for government actions? Thank you.
Well, many thanks and good afternoon to everyone. Yes, I have written some remarks, and I'm very proud, first of all, to welcome all of you. I feel very proud for different reasons. The main one, of course, is that my fellow citizen, Maria Soledad Cisterna, as a special envoy of the UN Secretary General for Disability and Accessibility. Thank you, Maria Soledad, for your commitment for disabled people, for leading this global campaign, and of course for the inspirational work you have planted here in the framework of this event today, the House of the Family of the United Nations in Asia Pacific. As the Executive Director said today morning, Asia Pacific is the first region in the world to launch this global campaign. But it's not only the first time where ESCAP has been in the forefront, and in the forefront, I would say, the social development, the social inclusion. The Incheon strategy to make the right real for persons with disabilities, as he mentioned, endorsed by the Commission in Resolution 6913, provided the Asia-Pacific region and the world with the first regionally agreed disability-specific development goals. Chile would not more than agree with this strategy, and that's the spirit on which we are, and one of the reasons why we're here, and my country is here today with you. The World Health Organization estimates that 50% of the world population is composed by people with disabilities. By projecting this figure to the total numbers of inhabitants nationwide, in the case of Chile, we arrive to the conclusion that at present the population with disabilities living in my country reaches more than 2.5 million people. In fact, the last general results of national prevalence, according to the Second National Study of Disability 2015, places 16.7% of the population of 2 and more years with some degree or disability. Do you think the figures are too high for a country like Chile? In our case, the problem of disability has been present for more than 50 years as an important demand of civil society organizations, whose work, especially after the return of democracy in the early 90s, generated discussion and subsequent enactment in 1994, the first legal framework that benefited people with disabilities in Chile. I will not go on beyond on the details of the legal framework that situates us in the ongoing situation, but just to mention something, 2010 establishes standards on equal opportunities and inclusion for persons with disabilities. Later on, more recently, Law 20,609 that establishes measures against discrimination, the so-called Ley Zamudio. Law Decree 50 in 2016 that establishes the General Ordinance of Urbanism and Construction. And finally, Law 20,015 that encourages the inclusion of people with disabilities in the world of labor. The Second National Study of Disability 2015 is a milestone in the field of disability studies in the country, as its results will allow the development of pertinent and timely public policies on social inclusion for people with disabilities. It is also prepared with a human rights approach, in accordance with the provision of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities ratified by Chile in 2008. But may I remark that slowly and in a process not exempt from criticism from the Chilean society, Chile has been moving from the classical approach of charity, center of the biomedical, and one based on human rights, which recognize children, young people, and adults with disabilities as subjects of law and not charity. Putting the accent on social barriers rather than the deficiency that we should present in a permanent or transitory way, since it is precisely this which exacerbates exclusion, obstructing true and real integration. This approach, centered on human rights, requires all levels to be recognized as citizens with rights. Mainly the right to have an access to the best quality of life possible in respect of our diversity, which means finding and freely dispose of the adequate service to meet the needs. We speak about special rights in the field of health, access to education, clear policies around work, accessible transportation and without discrimination, more citizen participation, among other vital areas. That is making visible their rights, placing them as fundamental priority for the states, including indeed Chile. Which are more or our main ongoing challenges in terms of public policies, inclusive education, early attention and higher education, residential model for adults with disabilities and dependents, labor inclusion law, actions on education and social transformation, access to work, justice, information, support network, goods and services, as well, of course, as electoral and political rights, among others. Dear friends, today among the political products of this leading world campaign, the Special Envoy have left us a decalogue of 10 principles for the protection, well-being, and developing of girls, boys, and adolescents with disabilities. It has been a long way to get to where you are today, and even more to do. The CRPD enshrines the human rights model for peoples with disabilities. A second idea that we want to leave reflected is to call the state parties of the Asia-Pacific region to take all necessary actions to spread the message of the campaign, especially considering the Ministry of Education, family ministers, and their landing towards the social basis of the community. This means replicating the decalogue of good treatment for its wide knowledge and dissemination to reach families, schools, neighborhood councils, legislature, the judiciary, society, organizational, civil society, in short, everyone. Towards the survival of humanity today, the global challenge that the world faces is the hope for a continuous and firm strengthening for political commitment. We must ensure, as the Executive Secretary said today, that no one is left behind. Thus, let us commit ourselves not only to the disinherited one day of the earth, but also to its cause, its reality and its future. Their future, of course, indeed, our future. I exist, I am a person just like you. Commit to me, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for sharing Chile's excellent efforts in developing comprehensive laws and policies in enhancing disability-inclusive development. I would like to thank all of our ambassadors for sharing their insights and national experience. While we are approaching 1 o'clock, I would still like to open the floor to other ambassadors and government representatives to hear their views and perspectives and national experiences in supporting persons with disabilities. I understand Ambassador of Turkey would like to have an intervention. Would you like to speak now? Yes.
Thank you very much. I have been listening to all the interventions quite intensively, and I appreciate all the speakers who are working, actually, who are in the on-site doing wonderful work, and also from our fellow ambassadors who gave us insights about and ideas about what's going on nationally in their countries. This is a very, very important subject. I have also personally had some, of course, experiences from family and friends. 2030 is a goal, but I think it is actually what needs to be done is now. And I think it does start with education, and education in the family as well. So while, of course, governments draw the framework for the work that needs to be done, I think it's also important to do a very holistic, to adopt a very holistic approach, like was said in the morning, well, previously. Turkey attaches a lot of importance to this issue, and for this reason we have a representative from our Ministry of Family and Social Affairs who flew in all the way from Turkey. So if you would kindly allow me to pass the floor to him, he will be giving you more insights about what we are doing at home. So, if you allow me, Head of Department from our Ministry, Mr. Kuz. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. My name is Tayyar Kuz, Republic of Turkey, Ministry of Family, Labor and Social Services, and General Directorate of Services for People with Disabilities. As the representative of Republic of Turkey, I have the pleasure of attending the regional launch of this campaign aimed at drawing a roadmap to provide a secured life to children and adolescents with disabilities in the world. Our national efforts to strengthen the right-based approach in disability services are mainly based on UN Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities, 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development to Leave No One Behind, and Incheon Strategy for Persons with Disabilities in Asia and the Pacific, to which we joined and made contribution during preparation and monitoring process. Recently in Turkey, some significant practices have been carried out in order to mainstream disability in all fields of policy and programs and to achieve sustainable, effective and efficient policies and services. Under the overarching aim of mainstreaming the right-based approach in all sectors for persons with disabilities, we have initiated the preparation for national strategy paper and plan of action on the rights of persons with disabilities, which will include measures to be taken in order to ensure that children and adolescents with disabilities can lead a secure life with their peers. Through the preparation of Turkey's strategy paper and plan of action on child rights 2013 and 17, we have recognized and reconfirmed the fact that the child's best interest is above all priorities for all children, including children with disabilities. Thus, we targeted to build a culture of children's rights which is based on the right to life, development, protection, and participation to social life, as well as the right of being free from discrimination. We believe that this campaign, which has been launched here today, will make significant contribution to providing a secure living environment for children and adolescents with disabilities. On this opportunity, I would like to thank all parties involved, particularly to all co-organizers, including ESCAP, UNICEF, Royal Thai Government, OHCHR, and ECLAC. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing Turkey's experience. Okay. Are there any other government representatives? Representative from Japan, please.
Thank you, Madam. Well, since we are running out of time and it's time for lunch, I will try to be very brief. I just would like to share with you the actions that Japan has taken so far in this field. First of all, the government of Japan has actively promoted the 3 successive Asia and Pacific decades of persons with disabilities by co-sponsoring all the relevant resolutions for these 3 decades. And secondly, Japan has already ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and we have enacted the relevant laws and regulations to protect the rights of those persons. And thirdly, regarding the education, which is very important, and that was also pointed out by Kumiko during the last session that we had today. And in order to realize the inclusive education system based on the conventions that I have just mentioned, we have created a variety of learning opportunities so that children with and without disabilities can receive education together. And the fourth point that I would like to mention, which is so far missing during the sessions that we had, that is a question about the protection of the persons with disabilities in case of natural disasters. Unfortunately, in Japan, we have so many natural disasters. And in such a disaster, all those persons with disability would suffer more than the others. And to protect the persons with disability in such a disaster case, we have been hosting the UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in 2015, and we have also adopted the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. And in this framework, we have also included the viewpoint to protect the persons with disabilities in case of natural disasters. And we are also promoting disaster risk reductions, and we are promoting the protection of those persons with disabilities in the Asia-Pacific region too. And last but not least, the government of Japan will continue to support domestic and international activities for persons with disabilities in cooperation with ESCAP and other member states. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing Japan's experience and the government's commitment, not only in Japan, but also in supporting our regional program in enhancing disability inclusion in development agenda. I see there are no further interventions from our government representatives. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have heard a lot of success stories, strategies, and solutions to address the concerns of persons with disabilities. To ensure the voices of children and adolescents, their voices are heard and their rights are fulfilled. Government commitments and actions are critical to the success of the campaign that is being launched today for the Asia-Pacific region. We are truly proud that the Asia-Pacific region is the first region that launched the global campaign. I'd like to thank all of our speakers for their interventions and the active participants or participation of our participants today. With this, let me close this session and hand over to MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chai Chai, and thank you, Excellencies, for shedding light on how your respective governments advance disability-inclusive development. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Maria Soledad Cisternas Reyes, Special Envoy of the United Nations Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, to deliver the closing remarks.
Thank you very much to all of you for your very interesting comments. Thank you to the authorities in the opening remarks. Thank you to the panelists, speakers. Thank you to the excellencies, ambassadors of different countries. Thank you for the intervention of the representatives of governments in this moment. And I would like to say that this is the conclusion of this ceremony, but this is only the beginning of the campaign. And I know that Asia-Pacific is a very strong region with the means to deliver the campaign in different places of the region, in different corners of the countries, that the citizens receive at the school, at the neighborhood, in the families, etc., the contents of this campaign. The idea is that the message of this campaign can echo in Asia Pacific to multiply the voices of children with disabilities and adolescents with disabilities for the respect of their inherent dignity and their human rights. And I would like, finally, I would like to say that the campaign is for the happiness of children and adolescents with disabilities, for our happiness too, and to give them the environment to develop all their abilities, merits, capacities, talents, eliminating stereotypes, prejudice, and harmful practices. In this way, they will have a good preparation for the inclusion at the school, in the work, in the society in general, for the public and political participation, for decision making. For this reason, this is the beginning, but the work is huge for the future, and I will be very happy that the slogan "Commit to me will be the slogan that we can bring in our heart. And I would like to say thank you to the lawyer Paula Royave, my collaborator directly, and at the same time to Michelle Corima, the designer that prepared, volunteer the beautiful pictures that light each rule of the 10 principles. Thank you very much for all. We will continue with our connection, with the support of all persons that are here, with the Deputy Executive Secretary General here, the ambassadors, etc., my friend Monty Buntan, etc., to follow with this campaign in this important region, Asia Pacific. And at the end, I would like to finish in this moment with or out of the protocol, because I would like to invite to the civil society, especially the worker of the chocolate, to take a picture here together. Thank you very much.
Okay, so maybe Maria, you can just can I finish? Yeah, you can just invite, thank you all, then invite them to take photos. So with the who is it, ABCD? Just persons with organizations of persons with disabilities. Just invite them.
Thank you, Ms. Cisternas. May I please invite members from organizations of persons with disabilities to kindly come to the stage to click a picture with the special envoy. It went off at the end.
It's okay.
They should have told us earlier. It was running to their things.
I did it exactly, and then.
Yeah. Is that weird? Okay. Okay. I'll just say thank you so much.
Thank you, Maria.
Sorry, I couldn't say because like
No,
she
don't worry.
closed. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I think people seem to be enjoying.
Yeah, it was really good.
Good.
I think
Good.
so.
Panel discussion was
Everything
good.
was good.
Good.
Everything. Enjoyed.
I mean, I didn't know the person who flew from Turkey was kind of
know, the government official?
He came, he was there at the Beijing meeting. Really? I think so. I remember seeing him. He was at the Beijing meeting. Even
The ambassador?
The panelist?
Yeah.
He was so articulate. Dr. Siri, he was sitting at the top.
He's very good, huh?
He was so good.
Yeah.
Very clear, right? Very articulate.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
เหนื่อยแล้วหมดแรงแล้วด้วยจะไม่ได้กินข้าวเลยปะแล้วเอากระเป๋าก่อน